So, Ian, thank you for coming up. I know this has been on my radar for a long time. I don't know if it's been on your radar or not. Wells talks about you very often, and just your leadership qualities and your healing qualities and just your entrepreneurship. A lot of the stuff that you're doing, I think, is very congruent with the listeners of this show. And so there's always a part of me. It's like whenever Ian becomes available for an episode, I would jump at that opportunity. And then Wells told me, was it yesterday or the day before? He's like, hey, Ian's in town. And so, yeah, I'm excited to do this and make this happen. Again, I think those topics, both healing, law enforcement, entrepreneurship, those are things that resonate with a lot of people. Yeah. And we could probably talk for 2 hours on any one of those topics. But how I like to do the show is just allow guests to kind of introduce themselves and where you're from, what you're about, so they kind of get to know you. And then we just go down whatever rabbit holes we want. Right before we started recording, you referenced remembering when my video came out.
Yes.
And I said, dude, let's talk about that on the air real quick, just because that's, if I'm being honest, that's also the reason the majority of people are consuming this show, is because my social media blew up when that happened, and I ended up starting this show as a result. Yep. And so that was a big part of my journey with these listeners. And it's, that moment literally changed the trajectory of the rest of my life. Yep. Just by deciding to share my thoughts for 7 minutes. It's pretty bizarre, man.
Yeah. Well, you referenced being on my radar, and absolutely. So when I saw that video, I was one of the assistant commanders at the police academy here in Washington State, and I'll tell you, there's very few people these days in any time that will choose their personal values over the comfort and security of the moment.
Yeah.
And so to see a video where somebody is putting everything on the line to move toward their personal value. I mean, you think of legendary figures like Rosa Parks, right? That says, not today.
Yeah.
Today I'm standing for values, no matter the consequences. And there's almost always consequences. As you saw firsthand, there were consequences, but it changed the course of your life because you were willing to stand in value. So yeah, this has been on my radar for a long time.
That's
you
awesome,
and I
man.
Run in similar circles. So
yeah, the thing about that for me, because a lot of people are like, a lot of my peers, police officers, especially a lot of people at the port, they're like, Greg, what are you doing, dude? Like, you got a family, like you got kids. And on one hand, I see where they're coming from, right? But for me, my response to all of them was, listen, if I show my family that I bend my morals or I don't stand for what I believe in because someone's willing to pay me enough money, that's actually something that's going to disallow me to be able to look at myself in the mirror. Where I know, dude, if I had to go to Amazon or UPS or get my real estate license, like, I've done enough hard things in my life that I knew, hey, if I have to start over, then I'm going to have to start over. And it is what it is. Luckily, I already had this gym, and a result of 2020 was this gym growing by 600%.
Wow.
And now this place is financially viable enough to feed my family. And so it's interesting how standing up and preaching what you believe actually can come back and serve you as well. But you have to be able to have the courage to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of men in our society are controlled through fear these days. Yeah. So
one of the most powerful questions you could ever ask is, what would I do in this moment if I wasn't ruled by fear? If fear wasn't on the table, what decision would I make?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, fear is a component, and that's where what you just said, the value of courage, really does come into play. Is it's this moment is requiring of me something that is going to potentially hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable, and I'm going to have to push forward and do the right thing.
Yeah. And I remember because the video was made on my last work day of the week. So I was actually in the Starbucks drive-thru when my commander called me and was like, hey, and the ironic thing is he actually reached out to me earlier that morning. He's like, I love your video, dude. What a great message. And I was like, cool. If the commander's down with it, I'm good, right? Yeah. And then he called me back a couple hours later. He's like, hey, I could just tell. Yep. He goes, that the video, I've actually been directed to tell you it has to come down.
Yep.
I said, sir, a couple hours ago, you said it was a good message. He goes, yeah, but it's just getting too big. I said, so a good message is getting too big. Okay. And my wife looked over at me and she knew, like, because he said, listen, you got to pull it down.
Yep.
No big deal. You pull it down, we're good to go. You don't pull it down, we're going to have to open up an investigation for social media violation and insubordination. And they had all of their policy, their ducks in a row to be able to do that. And ultimately that's what happened. But she looked over and knew that when they gave me that ultimatum, we were starting over. Yeah. Our life was about to drastically change. But that's okay too, right? Like, and I always say this too. There's the caveat that I think is important to tell people is like, I liked the Port of Seattle as an agency. I liked the people I work for. We had a chief that I got along with very well. But if I'm being completely honest, the profession of law enforcement never filled my heart. And I was never really passionate about it, even though I felt like I was good at it. You know, you talk to my coworkers, there's some of them that'll talk shit about me now, but when I was a cop, I had nothing negative in my file. I had no complaints from citizens. Like, I knew how to do my job. I did it well, but I was never really passionate about it. And I knew at some point I would have to find an exit strategy, and I wasn't sure what that looked like. And then it was forced upon me, and it was what it was. But I mean, if being a police officer was like the end all be all, and it was like my number one passion, maybe I would have looked at that situation a little differently. Yeah. But it is what it is, man.
But it's nobody's end all be all. There's always options out there for anybody.
I think so. Yeah.
It's a false sense of this is all I have. And I think that's why a lot of people stay in a profession that is corrosive to them.
Yes.
Policing as a profession isn't corrosive in nature, but because of what it does to a lot of people, it can be.
Well, and I've seen this, and we'll get into your story and your background. And I mean, the fact that you were a commander of the Washington State Police Academy lets me know you have a pretty substantial background inside of law enforcement. How many people have you seen that, you know, they get a decade in and they're just disgruntled, and then at that point, they're literally chasing a paycheck or a pension and retirement? It's like, dude, I got 12 more years. And it's like, man, that's a substantial block of your life to just allocate it to something that you're not passionate about anymore. Yeah. And it's really sad. And it's funny because of my path. I hear from a lot of police officers and they say exactly what you just told me. Yeah. They say, I would love to do something different, man. Like, you had jiu-jitsu to fall back on. So that was a pretty fortunate thing, but I don't have anything to fall back on. And I always tell them, I say, if you tell yourself you can't do anything else, then you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy and you're never going to do anything else. Yeah. Or you could say, hey, you know what? Nights and weekends, I'm going to, like I said, get my real estate license or whatever it is. You can still pursue something that's going to take your life on a new trajectory. Yeah. And financially, you're going to be okay if you're smart. But people feel trapped. They allow that fear to really dictate the trajectory of their life. And in my experience, almost every single cop I knew that was 20 years in was just disgruntled as could be, you know?
Well, you say disgruntled, but you just mentioned two things. And again, this is my theory on the way this shows up in the military. I reference the responder community quite often. We talk about first responders, but the responder community is anyone who's willing to show up and serve. You've got corrections, dispatch, all the way up through your medical examiners. They're the end of a lot of things. They're at the tail end of a lot of these responses, but do you think they're not suffering the same traumas by what they do? And so I talk about the responder community, and here's what I see as a consistent. The brain gets rewired. Repeated exposure to trauma after trauma after trauma. The brain gets rewired and the amygdala begins to grow. Your survival brain begins to grow, and you start filtering the world through one of two responses, fight or flight. Freeze is just basically my brain can't decide which is a more viable option, and we get stuck between, do I fight this or do I flee? And what you just said, the disgruntled officer, all that is I'm in a perpetual state of fight.
Yeah.
So it shows up fight, response, fight, response, fight, response. I'm angry at admin. I'm angry at my coworkers. I'm angry at the community. I'm so frustrated at this. Or it shows up as flight response, meaning I've got a countdown timer for retirement. As you said, 12 years, and I'm already counting the days, right?
Yeah.
I've already got my property picked out in Montana of where I'm going to go after all this, or
and
Tennessee.
And your fifth wheel. And,
yeah. So that's when I hear that from officers, I always say that's flight response. You're already looking at your escape plan.
Wow.
To get away from the world, to get away from people.
Because I've heard that 1,000 times, but I don't think I've ever connected the dots like that. And it actually makes perfect sense.
Well, and in the responder community, think about the ultimate flight response, which is suicide.
That's right. Yeah.
I no longer have the will or the energy to fight another day.
Yeah.
Right. And if those are my only two options, is fight or flight, what happens when we run out of the energy or the will or the passion or the nobility or being connected to what is important to us? And we throw our hands up and say, you know what, I'm done.
Yeah. No, and I've seen that same scenario play out. Well, I mean, personally, I've lost 7 friends to suicide from people that I served with in the military because it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So what do you think would be the solution to combat this and help change the trajectory of the first responder community?
Yeah. Great question. The only way to get out of that perpetual state of flight, because you're not going to change the profession.
You're going to be dealing with shitty people. You're going to see scary things. You're going to see traumatic things.
It's a traumatic profession.
Yeah.
I mean, every responder environment is going to be traumatic in nature, but how do you mitigate some of the effects on the brain? Right. And there's so many practices, mindfulness practices, meditation, health, wellness, sleep, when it's viable, because a lot of people don't sleep in the moments they actually can.
Mm-hmm.
They don't set up systems for themselves that allow for them to maximize the amount of time that they get to rest. Building healthy practices to allow your brain to recover from that. Emotional processing is another big one. Emotional metabolizing, as we say. I mean, these are some of the things that get ignored, and because they get ignored, I think in the responder community, you also see a default position. If I were to ask right now, what is the one emotion that you think is culturally acceptable to express in policing or the military?
That's called anger.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So I can only identify out loud my anger.
Yep.
I can't express joy, gratitude, appreciation, happiness, peace. And those are that's the emotional world that actually keeps us not only healthy, but effective. When you look at optimal performance, your ability to shoot better, drive better, make good decisions, solve problems, use discretion, all of those things are incumbent on being able to access the emotions that produce a physical response in your body to dump serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, DHEA, the hormone that actually gives you access to optimal performance. All the things that will create a physiology in you to be the best version of yourself aren't accessible when all we can connect with is anger or frustration or resentment.
So, I reference the Book of 5 Rings fairly often on the show because I think, coming from the Ranger Regiment and then going right into law enforcement, I got to see both the military aspect of not allowing ourselves to ever express emotion or find any type of balance. And then once you get into the world of law enforcement, it's very similar. Yeah. And, that book talks about hey, if you want to be the hardest warrior who can fight with, the most technique and the most aggression and the most will, you also have to know how to love, and you also have to know how to decompress through gardening, writing poetry, writing music. And I always say in the show when I'm talking about this, I'm like, man, if I told my Ranger squad, hey, I know you guys are going to go out tonight, get drunk and beat up college students, but I'm going to go tend to my flower garden.
Yeah.
Like you would be an outcast.
Right.
And then the ironic thing of that is like, no, actually investing in some of the other aspects of life would have made us a better warrior and a better version of ourselves. But the American warrior is like, it's, you know, the military has most men for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then there's a certain percentage of them that'll do 2 enlistments, and then it just gets smaller and smaller until you get a handful of guys that'll do a full 20 or 30. But they're not worried about balancing you. They're worried about they get to redline you for 4 to 6 years and then send you on your way.
Yep.
And now here we are 20 years later, and we're witnessing the after effects of that in real time, and it's not good. Yeah. And so, you know, as far as like in the world of first responders, it's the exact same thing, except their battle zone is right here.
Yeah.
And they never get to fully detach from it. And I don't know necessarily what the answer is. What I preach to most police officers that are in this place is jujitsu, and not for the ability to defend yourself and fight, but for the community.
Yeah.
And then also when you're training jujitsu, that's a period of time where you get to detach from everything else and you only worry about what's right in front of you. And I think like most people are always in a constant state of like worrying about the past or worrying about the future. And both those things, if you invest too much energy in either one of those, doesn't serve you. Right. Whereas jiu-jitsu, you get to invest in what's happening right now. And that's healing for a lot of people. Yeah. But for whatever reason, like the law enforcement community, there's a percentage of them that have bought off on jiu-jitsu. But a lot of people, like, they won't take those steps to try and find happiness. Yeah. And then they're just in that perpetual downward spiral.
I love the way you said that, though. I mean, when you're on the mat, it really is. It brings you right into the present moment. You're not thinking about the past. You're not thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow or what groceries you need to pick up.
Yeah.
You are second by second thinking about what you're doing in that moment. And I mean, every study out there shows that when you are in the present moment, you are happier.
Yeah.
Right.
And I bet most human beings, until modern times, just the nature of how we lived as human beings kept us present in the moment. Yeah. And we're getting further and further away from that. And that's probably why we're seeing the decline in mental health and everything that we're watching.
Right. Well, I mean, even if you take things like a pandemic, most people who experienced the pandemic were worried about the future.
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't the present per se, unless you had COVID or were in the hospital and hooked up to, as we were bunkered down in our homes, we had this fear of what could be.
Yeah.
Being able to get groceries, buy toilet paper, you know, hand sanitizer went up like 6,000%, right? You know, so there was such an uncertainty about the future that it really did not only pulled us out of the present moment, but it really brought us into a dark place. I have a really good friend of mine, Angie, that is in Asheville right now, North Carolina, and completely devastated over there, obviously. But as soon as she had cell service, we connected, and I said, "How are things going over there? I mean, I've been watching the news. I've been worried about you." She said, "It's like going back in time. We've not been able to use our cell phones," and she said, "It's really weird. People are just leaving notes on houses so that we can connect. And this is where I'm going to be. And here's how you can get a hold of me. And let's connect in this way." Well, she was talking about ending up at this place where there was, like 9 people in this house. And I was asking her, how are you doing with that? And she said, during the day, we're doing yoga, doing guided meditations, doing massages. What she was explaining sounded like a retreat. And the wildest thing about it was not only were they present, but in everything that she had experienced, I didn't sense any victim mentality on her. In fact, it was almost no different than any other conversation we had had before.
Wow.
With everything that they've got going on, she was still able to withstand the worst of conditions that she had probably gone through. So,
well, dude, don't you think, like, I'm just wrapping up my book right now, and I wrote a chapter about this, and there's something about facing hardship and adversity that forces you to level up as a person.
Absolutely.
And so when you're enduring something, especially if you're enduring it with a group of peers and people and you're going through this together, like, and don't get me wrong, like, people lost everything. People lost loved ones. There's lots of tragedy around it. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are going to really struggle emotionally and whatnot. But for the people that the power's out and they're going hungry for a while and they can't communicate with anyone, it's like, they're going to look back on those times probably and be like, man, remember when our neighborhood all came together and we rallied and we went and we cut all the trees down that were blocking our neighbors in. And then we did this and we did that. And it's almost like there's a sense of purpose and a sense of pride, and that starts to feed the human spirit.
Yeah.
So it's like, I hear you say that, and it's, on one hand, it's kind of surprising, but when you really think about it, it's like, oh no, we're supposed to go through adversity and come together, and then we find victory, and that's the human experience.
Yep.
And human beings have been going through that since the beginning of time. And I always say America has figured out a way to kind of remove adversity from our lives, and it sounds good on paper. Like, dude, we're not starving anymore. We're not freezing to death. Our communities aren't being ravaged by warfare. Like, those are all good things. And don't get me wrong, I don't want my children to have to necessarily experience those things. But sometimes going through some hardships brings people together. It offers perspective. And on the other side of it, you're going to be better off for it. Yeah. And I guarantee you, those people that are going through that in North Carolina right now, I also have a friend out there that I've been checking in with. Yeah. And he's saying a lot of the same things. Yeah. So that's cool, though.
Yeah. You think about any of the legendary figures in your past, the people you call heroes, the ones that you're like, that's the person I want to be. That's the person I want to emulate. I guarantee there's some level of tragedy,
of course,
that created this person that you look up to and you say, oh, they're who I want to be.
Yeah. I mean, right there.
Yeah.
William Wallace. I mean, Braveheart came out when I was 14, and I remember sitting in the theater with my mom, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I was like, I want to fight somebody over freedom. Yeah. Like, it just felt right. You know, that scene where they slit his wife's throat, and William Wallace was just like, okay, it's on now. Yeah. Like, I tried to be a reasonable person. That's off the table, and I'm going crazy. Yeah. And that resonated with me. And you're exactly right. All the men and women that we look up to from history, they went through some shit, man. Yep. And that's what validated them as human beings.
Great example. And it's going full circle to the beginning of this conversation. I think about when you choose a value over your own comfort. You're willing to sacrifice everything for a value. And that's what's so, I think, impactful about your story is you put the value above the easy path, the expected path.
Yeah.
But it changed the world, you know, and same with William Wallace. I remember going to Edinburgh Castle and looking up at his statue they have out there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, you know, whenever I'm talking about this with people, I have to reflect and be like, good, bad, or indifferent. Where I found myself as a young man was fighting on the streets of Ramadi, Iraq. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about the reasons we were there now with hindsight as a 44-year-old man, mm-hmm. Seems pretty ridiculous, right? Like, and most of the guys I served with hold that same perspective these days. Yeah. But at the time, we thought we were doing the honorable thing. And as a young man, I came to terms that my beliefs and my values may very, very well likely cause me to lose my life. And that wasn't like that wasn't something I arrived at through like, oh, I was scared or fearful. It's just the numbers game and what we were doing. I was like, there's a good chance that I don't make it out of this deployment.
Right.
And I honestly think you kind of have to find peace with that to be able to operate in that environment. Because if you don't find peace with it, that's good. What are you going to do? Are you going to operate in fear for the next 4 months?
Yeah.
And so a lot of young guys that were doing that job were almost at peace with losing their life. And I honestly think that's something that I've been able to carry, where it's like, hey, if I don't believe in what's going on and I don't like what this agency's doing or what that agency's doing, like, I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I've been faced with a lot harder adversity than the thought of having to get a new job. So that's why there was not a lot of fear around that. But as the saying goes, the hardest day you've ever had is the hardest day you've ever had.
Right.
And so for some people that could cause a paralyzing fear. And it's not because I'm some badass or whatever. It's just because my life experience exposed me to things that maybe a lot of other people haven't experienced. So it wasn't hard for me to be like, nah, this doesn't make sense. I'm not doing this. So you were a commander still at the academy during that whole thing, huh?
Yeah, so I was assistant commander. I was overseeing all the corrections academies, probation, juvenile detention, and those academies at the time. And I was counterpart to Russ Hicks at the time. And
so I went through when you were commander. Do you remember that?
I don't remember you coming through. I remember seeing that video though. And
okay.
Thinking, wow. And what I remember about that, and correct me if I have any of your story wrong, but I remember exactly what you said, is that you were given the opportunity to just go back on it.
Yes. Yeah.
Or hey, we can fix all this right now if you just go against your values.
It's exactly what they said to me.
And that's got to be even harder. I mean,
I wouldn't say it was hard because I knew where I was going to land on that decision, because all of my friends and my family and my teammates, if I were to rescind my words simply to maintain a paycheck, I knew that I would lose respect, the respect that those people hold for me. So that wasn't an option. And I knew that I couldn't do that. I couldn't embarrass my family like that. Like, oh, hey, you stand up and you speak your mind and you try and motivate. And I was trying to motivate others to do the same thing too. Because here's the deal. And I'm sure you saw this too. In the lunchroom, every single cop that I served with was really disgusted on how the profession was treating people at those times.
right.
And so like, if every cop in the lunchroom is disgusted with how our profession is treating people, I think it's up to the profession to stand up and say, hey, this isn't what we do. This isn't who we are.
Right.
And that's why for me, it wasn't really a hard decision. But the thing is, it's like, it's easy to say those things behind closed doors. But then once your livelihood's on the line, most people are like, you know what? And we saw it over and over again, especially with the vaccine mandates. Yep. There was a lot of guys like, I won't take that. Oh, okay, I will take that.
Right.
And here's the thing. If you want to take it, right? Or even if you don't want to take it, well, don't stand up and verbalize that you're going to show courage unless your plan is to show courage. Right. Like, I just think your words have to be congruent with your actions, regardless of what those actions are. Yep. And it was a really weird time.
It was a unimaginable time.
What was it like for your experience at the academy?
I mean, I didn't give too much of an intro, but
let's go into your story.
Living in
people always hear my story.
Living in Seattle at the time, I really struggled, especially when the county I was living in started talking about you were going to have to show, your Vax cards and stuff like that just to get into restaurants in the Seattle. And I said, this is going in a really bad direction for me. And we moved, me and my family, we went to San Antonio, Texas. So I'm visiting from San Antonio, Texas now. And it was really strange. And an energy practitioner. I feel energy. And the only way to describe the difference, I remember going to San Antonio from Seattle, and the minute I was in the city, it was like a weight had been lifted off. And when I got there, it was almost like the pandemic had never happened.
Wow.
Nobody was looking at each other with suspicion. You didn't see masks, you know. And I would also say you didn't see a bunch of catastrophe as a result of it either. You know, I'm sure there were people getting sick, but without all the fear and all of that, I think people were actually staying healthier. You know, they were in the sunshine. They were out in their communities.
Still living their lives, doing their things.
Still living their lives. It was really weird. My wife came in after me, and I picked my family up at the airport a couple days later, and I remember she got off the plane, came out, and I said, "You can get rid of that." You know, she was wearing her mask.
Oh yeah.
And she takes it off and kind of tucks it away, and I said, "No. You can get rid of it."
Yeah, throw it in the garbage. Yeah.
She was like, "What?" And she said, "But yeah, but if we go to the restaurant," and I said, No, you don't get it. We had already in that short amount of time been so conditioned that nope, they're not going to let you in.
Yeah. You have to wear your mask while you get seated.
Yeah.
And then once you're sitting on a stool, you can take it off.
Yeah.
All the weird stuff. Well, how did you land on San Antonio?
So as an Air Force vet, I was there for basic and tech school. I loved San Antonio. I don't know if you've been through there, but
no, I haven't spent any time there.
Oh man,
I spent a decent amount of time in Texas over the last couple of years, but not San Antonio.
Next time you're in Texas, make it a point to come out.
Okay,
I'll show you around. Beautiful city. What the seventh biggest city in the U.S. and it is.
Oh, it's massive.
It's massive.
Okay.
It is a big city. This is what people always say. It's a big city with a small town feel.
Cool.
So I am 20 minutes from downtown, and I'm in a neighborhood where my kids go out and play. They ride bikes. After school, where do you find the kids? They're out in the neighborhood, throwing the football, kicking the soccer ball. Where the kids land, you know, where are the bikes? That's the world I grew up in, where you're not checking in with your parents. You're riding your bikes over to the friend's house, and that's how the parents know where you are. And it's so strange. You know, I remember being here. I think Seattle is one of the most beautiful places on the planet.
Yeah. But it's really, it's on a downhill trajectory, you know? It's sad.
It's an energy for sure. I love the safety and the community of San Antonio. So yeah, definitely check it out. My wife is from Arizona, but she was a Army combat medic. So she had been through there for AIT as well.
Okay. So then it was an easy choice for both you guys. Yeah. We liked that spot.
We liked the spot.
Yeah.
So
then, I mean, so you went to the Air Force at what, right out of high school?
Yeah.
And did that thing? Did you do like similar to me, like an enlistment or two and got out, or?
Yeah, I did 4 years.
Okay.
Yep.
And then went right into corrections after that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I did personal training for a couple of years. So
got it.
Worked at a gym, kind of got my feet under me, and needed a place to land, and went to work for the jail.
Okay. Yeah. What jail were you at?
Snohomish County.
Oh, okay. So you were local to here.
Yep.
And then
used to live right up the street, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And then is that where your career, you were at Snohomish County the whole time until you took a position at the academy?
Yeah, I did a TAC position out there. So I was an instructor from 2011 to 2014.
Okay.
And then went back to the jail as a sergeant, took over as the training sergeant. And then in 2017, I was offered a position to go out there and take over as an assistant commander position, overseeing all the corrections.
Got it.
World, essentially.
How was that, being in the jails?
Interesting.
Yeah. How long were you there in total then?
About a decade.
About a decade.
Yep.
Was that something that at that time, were you already into the energy work and stuff that you're doing?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because, dude, I'll tell you, as a deputy, I was a deputy in Los Angeles with the Marshal Service.
Oh, wow.
And so I did that for 4.5 years. And as you know, the Marshal Service is who's responsible for all federal inmates are remanded into our custody. So we're the ones that are dealing with going back and forth to the jails for all of the federal agencies, so these people can have their day in court or for medical appointments, whatever the federal prisoner's needs are, falls on the Marshal Service.
Right.
And man, you would go into, it was called the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, and you'd go into this tunnel, and all the inmates that had their court hearings that day would be lined up, and you'd search them and put the 3-piece suits on, and then take them up to our cell block, and it just felt dark.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember thinking, I was like, man, these guys that are doing this job full time, it's almost like they're doing time too.
Yeah.
And is that what it felt like here to a certain extent, or?
Yeah. Working at Snohomish County still, I've been all across the nation with contracting, training, doing work inside other jails and prisons. So I've seen a lot of contrast inside different institutions. Snohomish County wasn't too bad. When I've done a lot of work with California DOC as well.
Okay.
Their stories blow me away. I mean, the COs that do that kind of work, it's another world.
Well, dude, and I was down there from 2011 to 2015.
Yeah.
So not too long ago, about a decade ago now at this point. And man, like San Bernardino County Jail, because we contracted there. A lot of our inmates stayed there. And you'd make a federal arrest and they'd be begging you, please send me to the MDC. Please don't send me to San Bern. Because those San Bern County deputies, because how it works in California is the sheriff's office, like it's a couple years you spend in the jail and then you move to work in the streets. It's not two different positions. It's one position. And it's kind of like, that's your introduction to the agency is work in the jails. And they used to it was like old school rules. Like those deputies would stomp dudes' guts out and they knew what was up. And those guys were afraid of that place. And it was like, fuck, man. But it's funny because they're like these big bad gangbangers, you know, like, but once you're in custody, you're in their control and they know how the game's played and they wanted nothing to do with it. They would beg you, please assign me to MDC. But it's like, hey, there's no beds there. It is what it is, you know?
Sorry, man.
Yeah. Dude, looking back on that, do you ever look back on that? I mean, and you're still involved in it as I'd like to get into that as an instructor. So you're still very present and involved in that world. But I look back on that world now because I'm so far removed from it. And it's like, man, taking people and putting them in cages, there's something that feels weird about it. And I'm not saying it's wrong. There's certain people that shouldn't have the freedom to just go amongst our citizens and wreak havoc on society. I get it. But it's also crazy putting a person in a cage like they're a dog.
Yeah. And
I think if that doesn't feel kind of strange, it might be time to kind of like assess yourself a little bit, because that's a massive responsibility.
Yeah. It is weird. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize too is the system is set up in a way that is very secure. So we can look at it like, oh, we're putting somebody in a cage, but I can't tell you how many times people said, oh, I'm coming back.
Oh, I know.
They'll get out, they'll get high or do what they need to do, but they'll be right back. They would even say on the way out, see you guys on Friday. You know, they already had a plan.
Is it because those people, that's their norm and they're comfortable with that?
Security.
It's security.
I've got no security on the outside. Tony Robbins says that. You want security? Go to prison.
Yeah.
Right? We talk about wanting security. That shouldn't be the threshold.
No, right? Well, I remember in Los Angeles, a lot of the kids, and this is sad, but like you can't move up the food chain in a lot of these gang organizations without doing some time.
Yeah.
So like you have to do some time to get street cred. And so like it's not strange or out of the ordinary. It's like, hey, I got popped for this and now I'm doing some time. And when I get out, it'll move me up the food chain. Yeah. What a weird concept.
Yeah.
But it's the truth down there.
It's a culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And the same thing, those guys, it's a revolving door.
Yep.
What do you think the answer is on that? Because the judicial system, in my opinion, it would be awesome if we could literally change the trajectory of people's lives.
Right.
Like, hey, you got in here for doing some dumb shit like a lot of young men do. And now you're going to do 2 or 3 years in here. But when you get out, we're setting you up for success. It seems like there would be some options to do that as opposed to it just being a revolving door for these guys.
Yeah. That's tough because we don't have a real concise, we don't have an agreement about what the role of corrections is. Mm-hmm. Is it rehabilitation? That's what you're talking about. It should be to rehabilitate. Well, our system isn't set up to rehabilitate people. Is it to punish? Is it to
deter?
To deter. Mm-hmm. Is it to just remove people that are a threat from prey?
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's kind of a combination of all those things.
It can be. So then what is the solution? We have no way to figure this out, and they're trying to do things. California DOC even they're looking at countries like Norway and saying, wow, they have a really cool program for their prisons where they're giving them jobs and putting them in apartments. And what they do is it is a tier system where you go into prison, and by the time you get out, you're fully acclimated to the community again. And it's incredibly successful. But I would also argue that the people that go into those systems are not the same as the people that are entering our systems.
So like, even if we adopted their models, there's a likelihood we'd have very different results.
Yeah, it'd be worth testing, but I would be surprised if we got the same outcome.
Okay. Yeah, man. It seems like, obviously to sit here and kind of brainstorm, easier said than done, but talking to a lot of people that go through the federal system, when they get out, they feel like it's actually harder to get a job. It's harder to, once that's on your record in our society, it becomes kind of stifling. And I don't know, maybe that's just an excuse that those people say so they don't have to put in the work and actually try and go out there and succeed. But you hear time and time again, it's like, hey, once you have a felony on your record, it's like, it's way harder to get ahead. And there's a part of me that's like, on one hand, I get it. It's like, if you made some really bad decisions, there should be certain restrictions on your life. But on the other hand, if you go in, you do your time and you do it honorably and there's no more issues, that once you get out, fuck man, there should be a way for society to try and help those people find success. And it seems like, you saw it and I've seen it. It seems like it's more of a revolving door than anything.
Yeah. Another great name. And if you ever have the opportunity to sit down with, Jen Isham, she was Seattle PD and King County, sheriff, and another very values-based, standing up for her values person. She got involved with the IF Project. The IF Project is a program that was put together to try and do a lot of what you're talking about. And what they did was they paired her. She was a cop in Seattle. She went into the prison, I believe in Monroe. And what they did is paired her with an inmate who was a year before the release. And so what they do is they come in and mentor the inmate for a year prior to release. And then what you do is you mentor them for a year after release as well, trying to get them on the right track.
Okay.
And it's so interesting to hear her story, because she thought before that experience, she would look at people coming out of the system and have this mentality of, why can't you just get your shit together?
Mm-hmm.
She said it wasn't until walking with somebody coming out of the system that I realized I am there every step of the way, trying to get them on their medications, trying to get them the resources, and hitting barrier after barrier after barrier, and realizing this person wants to do the right thing and is not getting anywhere because of the system that's set up.
Oh,
so
I see.
You're absolutely right. I think it's very difficult for people to get on their feet, even if they want to.
And the thing is, it's like, if we're being completely honest, if you find yourself doing a long stint in prison, it's clear that you don't make the wisest decisions, right? So you can't expect those people to go from that to just suddenly coming out and being able to make good decisions for their future without some type of oversight or guidance, or at least the opportunity for oversight and guidance, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow, dude. And the thing is, it's like, you always hear that we have, I mean, what are the numbers? Do you know? Like the amount of people that we have incarcerated compared to most countries?
I just know, I think we're the number one in the world as far as our population number of incarcerated.
Uh-huh.
We're the highest percentage of our citizens.
I mean, and for being like, I mean, we're supposed to be America, right? We're supposed to have our stuff figured out. And we have the highest percentage of people.
Something's not working.
Yeah, dude. That's nuts. So then when you moved from Seattle down to San Antonio,
Yeah.
that's when you started your new trajectory, is like, instead of being part of an agency, I'm going to build a training curriculum and start to contract.
Yep.
See, the reason I really like the story is to circle back to what I said, is a lot of cops are like, I don't have anything to fall back on. Well, you created something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And here we are 4 years later.
Yep.
And it sounds like it's doing pretty good.
Yeah, it's doing great. I'm busier than I probably was before.
Okay.
Even working at the academy. I'm staying, I'm booked for the rest of the year. This year, next year's already booking out. And
so what is it? What is the program that did you create it yourself, or are you and Tim like partners in it?
So I do both. I do a lot. I do subcontract. A lot of people reach out and say, can you teach our product? And so I work with a lot of other companies in the law enforcement and responder world. And Tim is one of those where, you know, if he's got something that maybe is more in my wheelhouse, he'll call me up. Him and I have a great partnership. You probably know this, but I do a lot of work around what I am happy to call the soft skills: your emotional intelligence, communication, resiliency.
Yeah.
Right. All the things, the emotional world, de-escalation,
Yep.
leadership, all the things that are what we call the software that runs the hardware.
Yeah.
So he does a lot of work in the hardware world.
Yep. Okay.
You know, tactics and.
Well, hey, I always say, if you're going to partner with someone, they need to have a skill or an asset that you don't have.
Absolutely.
That's what a partnership is. If you show up being carbon copies of each other, what's the point of the partnership?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's a blast to be able to work with. Him and at ArcTac. He's been really supportive. Him and I went out to Dubai to train the police out there.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, is that kind of, once you started your own company, then you just put together training curriculums that worked well for you while you were involved in the jails, and said, hey, we can go out and teach other corrections officers or other jails some of the SOPs and tactics that we found very successful, put together a training program, and now you sell that to facilities?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's usually not even an SOP thing. If you look at any area where we see failure in performance, people already know what to do. They already have the SOPs in place. They already have the training. Give you an example. I had a local jail reach out and they said, can you provide us use of force training? And I said, well, what are you looking for? And he said, well, we had a CO that got frustrated at this drunk inmate that came in. They were kind of chipping, and the CO pushed him, and he fell backwards and hit his head and cracked his head open, or, you know, whatever it was. It was something terrible. And I said, you don't need,
Yeah, that's not use of force.
you don't need use of force training. You need emotional control. I guarantee that officer not only has been trained on the right thing to do, but they, not only do they know that that's wrong, but they're not in control of themselves. Like, what are we talking about here? You don't need to retrain them on something that they already know. That's ridiculous. And in the responder community, what I would say is we neglect that area of emotion, our emotional world, our resiliency, our communication, all the things that we know are going to run the hardware successfully.
Yeah. Okay. So then that's really your wheelhouse on what you're offering.
Yep.
And see, okay, that makes sense then why you would be finding success in it, because that's not a normal curriculum or a normal block of instructions that you typically receive in the first responder community. I mean, there was plenty of like online curriculums like, hey, make sure you go, I forget what they were called, but it's like every week there's another block of training that you just have to click through as fast as you can so you can certify that you did it, and everybody hated it and didn't take any of it serious.
Yep.
But if you have someone with a lot of experience that's actually teaching you something of value, like in front of you as a real block of instruction, it seems like you could actually affect change that way.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of the training that I do is experiential. Even though it's conceptual in nature, what we do is put people in situations to have them experience the thing, because a lot of people will say, oh, I would do this.
Mm-hmm.
This is simple. This is my belief system, and this is how I would handle that. And then what I do is I put them into situations to see if that's in fact how they would behave. And almost always it's not.
Okay.
So then I use that to illustrate, you just said you would do this, and when given the opportunity, you did just the opposite.
What do you find being the major disconnect with officers from behaving in a way that they believe they would behave when you're discussing a situation versus how they behave when you're actually really running it?
People don't know the values that drive their behavior.
Okay.
Typically. We started the conversation this way, but when you think about it, put yourself aside. You are a person of value, and I truly respect that. But if I were to take 10 responders, a few military, few fire, few cops, few COs, and put them into a room, and I asked the question, what are your values? If you were to put a poster on the wall at your house, what values, just pick 3, what do you think a lot of them would say?
I mean, I would think a lot of them would say courage.
Courage, absolutely.
Integrity. What's the last one? It's probably on every single law enforcement lunchroom wall.
Yeah. So let's just take those 2.
Okay. Yep.
Courage and integrity. And I would agree. In most of the classes that I talk to people, they would say, yep, courage and integrity. Do you live your life by those values? Absolutely. It's in everything I do.
Yeah.
Is it in telling your kids that the tooth fairy exists?
Uh-huh.
Is it in the fake smile that you gave to that person that just walked by? Is it in telling your spouse, yeah, you look great in that outfit, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
For the most part, no, it's not. And in fact, the disconnect there is when we say I have integrity, what we're actually saying is I'm not going to lie on a report.
Yeah.
But integrity goes beyond that, because if I say, Greg, that was a bad scene you were just at, how are you doing, man? What response do we typically give?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Even though you're not good and you're dealing with a whole bunch, you might even be suffering inside. So we have created a culture that is not embodying true integrity.
Yeah, it's just lip service.
It's lip service.
Yeah.
And I think that's why so many people are suffering. And you say courage. There's a difference between bravery and courage. And I think a lot of people confuse those, where you have a lot of responders that are incredibly brave. They'll go into this darkest of situations. They'll charge the gates of hell,
Yeah.
but don't have the courage to say, hey man, I'm worried about you. I've noticed these behaviors.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
have-
Isn't that crazy? You go
Yeah.
through a door with a gunman on the other side and you're willing to do that, but you're not willing to say that to your friend.
Yeah. I'm worried about you. Are you thinking about hurting yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any plans? Do I need to take your guns? Right. So a lot of people don't live by what I call these ideal values. There's another set of values that we actually have under those that drive most of our behavior forward. So if I said to the same group of people, what are the values that actually get you out of bed every day in the morning? What are the values that drive you forward? What do you think people would say then?
Probably like connection to their family.
Connection.
Yep.
Connection to family or just people in general.
Yeah.
I want relationships.
Yeah.
That's a huge one. What else? I'm putting you on the spot
Yeah,
right
no,
now.
yeah, I know.
You didn't know this was going to be
So
a
far,
pop
I've
quiz.
been doing okay though, right?
You're killing it.
Probably like a sense of duty or loyalty.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. I'm loyal
Yeah.
to my friends, maybe to my organization. Good. And again, just getting real about it, I have a sense of loyalty, so I will choose that loyalty over my ideal value of authenticity. That was the choice that you were given.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to choose this high level value, this ideal value of being completely authentic and standing by what you believe to be true, or do you want to be loyal to the profession? When we talk about
That's interesting you say that, because there were a handful of people that were really upset with me because they're like, you turned your back on us.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that, because that's exactly how a lot of people did feel. Like the loyalty to the organization, like, because I guess you're going to have to weigh these different things and like and attach a level of importance to them. Yeah. And in those people's minds, the loyalty to the organization was of the utmost importance.
Yep.
And they were very disappointed in me.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, because that's their value.
Yeah.
They value. So going back, we've got connection, relationships. That's important to me.
Of course.
Loyalty. Would you say that security?
Oh yeah.
Is that a
Yeah.
big one?
Security.
Money.
Security is one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
You know, I used to say this, or I used to see this in the contracting world overseas, because after I left the military, I did military contracts. And now you have the autonomy to interject your morals into how the team is operating, what the mission entails, because we're independent contractors. And I saw dudes that were willing to do, just like you said, some very, very, very brave things in the face of danger. But as soon as like their paycheck was on the line, oh man. And it's like, dude, you're willing to die, but you're not willing to stand up to your boss because you don't want to lose your job, even though you know what he's doing is wrong.
Yeah.
And I saw that play out a handful of times. It was always kind of strange to me. But hearing you unpack that as courage and bravery being different things, I like that. Yeah. I'm gonna talk about that, and the next 3 times I do, I'll reference you, and then after that, it's just
it's yours.
I'm gonna make it my own.
You own it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got all these values. We've got I drive forward for reputation. I do it for success. There's so many different things that are actually the values that drive our behavior, but we don't talk about those. We talk about the things that look good on a poster.
Yeah.
And so,
or the side of a squad car.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are our second set of values that drive our behavior, but there's a really, really big group of values that drive most of our behavior. And that is what I call aversion values. I value these things so much that I avoid them at all costs.
Yeah.
And I will choose aversion values over driving values any day. So I might have, as you said, a driving value of relationships and human connection. Then why am I not approaching every person that I see on the street and striking up a conversation and getting a new friend? What prevents me from making new connections?
Fear of rejection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why am I not putting in for the promotion? If I have a driving value of success, why am I not putting in for every job that will take me to the next level?
Yeah. Fear of failure.
Fear of failure. So these things that are really under the surface drive most of our behaviors. In fact, the industry knows this so well because we say integrity is the most important thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't actually promote embodying integrity. We promote a fear of being cast out.
Mm-hmm.
So we say, if you lie, you die.
Yeah.
If you lie, we will chew you up, spit you out, and you will no longer be serviceable in the industry.
Yep.
That doesn't give anybody integrity. It just builds the value of a fear of the consequence.
Yeah.
So
you'd be on the Brady list.
Yeah,
your career's over.
And it's true.
It's true.
But
yeah. But still, if it's driving you to make the right decision because you don't want to be on the Brady list, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're making that decision from a fearful place as opposed to making it from, I guess, what you would call a courageous place or an integrity-driven place.
Yeah. So to go full circle, I would say a lot of people don't know what values are actually driving their behavior. We all have all three sets of values, but what in that moment is driving your behavior?
Yeah. No, and I think the majority, I don't think this is just law enforcement. I think it is prevalent throughout our entire society is we have become a fear-driven society. And if COVID didn't prove that to everybody, I don't know what would.
Yep.
You know, like to the point where people were, I mean, you saw all the stuff going on. People didn't have a mask on. They'd be like literally ready to kill each other. Yeah. People didn't get vaccinated, ready to kill each other.
Yeah.
And
families completely ripped apart because
none of the data supports that kind of behavior. All that stuff was fear mongering.
Yep.
And if I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on, I think that was intentional as well.
You know, it's funny. I was going through the middle states when I went from Seattle to San Antonio, and it was so interesting because it was just the opposite. When I was hitting, I can't even remember what state I was in, but I was midway between Seattle and San Antonio, and in Seattle, it's if you're not wearing a mask, someone's gonna fight you.
Yes.
When I got to the center, it was if you're wearing a mask, I will fight you.
Yeah.
Like
get that shit out of here.
They were like, you know, you go show up to a restaurant and you ask the hostess, do I need a mask? They're like, not unless you want to get punched. Like, don't do it. We don't want any trouble in here, you know?
Dude, I remember I went down to Florida for something, and this was like mid-pandemic up here.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I got down there and I was like, dude, life is normal. What's going on? And people, just talking to random people, they're like, oh, you guys are still doing all that stuff up there?
Yeah.
Like, what? We haven't done that for a year.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we were up here in the Pacific Northwest. I feel like the pandemic lasted for 2.5 years or something. Real crazy, man.
Yeah.
Well, fuck, dude, we're already an hour in.
I know we didn't even start the conversation.
I want to geek out. I want to geek out on your energy stuff, man. And the reason I want to geek out on that is because as I get older, I'm starting to become more and more, I'm buying off more and more on all the stuff that I would have called people a tree hugging hippie for 10 years ago. Yep. Grounding, red light therapy, sound healing. I mean, you saw the bowl over there, and you commented on it when you walked in the Shruti box. Yeah. I've done plant medicine ceremonies, and I'm really finding that, like, our intentions matter. Our energy matters. I have a vision board on the back of my bedroom door where I look at the things that I want out of my life, and I think about it, and I put energy into it each morning. And I'm to the point now where this is no longer like woo-woo crazy stuff. I think this is how the energy works.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talked about a little bit on the phone yesterday about how with the universe being frequency and vibration, well, then why can't we affect our lives and our bodies and the outcome of our thoughts if we utilize these type of modalities to create things or to heal from things. And I watched that show called The Healer on TLC with Charlie Goldsmith, and I'm a believer in what he's doing. And then knowing that you're into that, I want to hear about it. I want to know what's up with it.
Where do you want to start with this?
Wherever you think the best place for people to start. I guess I would say this. When people hear energy healer, oh, you're some wacko that works with crystals, and like, no, I actually work with crystals and I'm not a wacko. Or like, how would you just unpack this to people that are just very unfamiliar with it in a way that's consumable, I guess?
Well, first I would say to the person that thinks that, I was that way too.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're in good company.
Yeah.
For anyone that's out there like, that's all wackadoo, I would have said that exact same thing. And if my path had been different, if I hadn't got introduced to that world the way I did, I don't think I would have believed it. I still would have said I believe in like faith healing, and you see miracles in religious institutions that were very clear to a lot of people. So there was obviously an element of that in the spiritual world, but I was first introduced to the concepts through science, and that's what really opened me up. And when you just take at face value what all of our physical reality is, it's all energy anyway. When you look at an atom, at its very core, you've got this ball that's almost completely energy. And then you've got the next one, the ones that it's connected to, and they're all energy, and they're not even touching. They're just connected through energy. And for me, that was really interesting, that we are mostly empty space, vibrating at a certain level. And it's because of the vibration that gives us the illusion of solidity, right? And so much so that when I touch something, we're not even actually connecting. And when you look at the science of that, it's just mind blowing to me. And the fact that I can't put my hand through this table right now is simply the energy that's holding it all together creates that barrier. And so that was the first part. And then when you start to look at how the way we show up and what happens in our body create certain vibrational frequencies. So my first exposure to some of this stuff was through the HeartMath Institute. I don't know if you know.
I'm not familiar.
HeartMath is a group of scientists that do nothing but study this kind of work. They measure your electromagnetic frequency outside your body. So if your heart is doing something, if you're producing a certain emotion or in a certain physical space, they could hold up monitors and actually read what state your heart is in, if you're in a state of coherence or incoherence. And they map this stuff, and they've shown that that there's an energy field outside of all of us that goes 6 to 10 feet outside the body, that's detectable by pretty rudimentary equipment you could probably make from equipment from Home Depot. But you can see how much we emit, and we are these energy beings that are in this constant state of energy exchange with the world around us. In fact, us being in the same room this close, we are sharing that energy field. And the HeartMath Institute has done experiments where one person who's conscious of this can go and sit down next to somebody who's unconscious of it, but both of them are hooked up. And if I can change my energy field, I can actually manipulate yours completely unconscious to you.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was some of those things that just started to blow my mind and open me up. And then I started looking at energy as it relates to emotion, because emotion is, and you probably know this, it's energy in motion. So when you have a certain stimulus in front of you that creates a physical response in your body. And obviously a lot of chemical things go along with that. You produce what we call an emotion, but it's nothing more than a physical response, a physical change and a chemical dump into your body, right? That creates a certain vibrational response in your energy, high or low. We talk about, in the Heart Math Institute, the terms they use are renewing and depleting. Renewing emotions vibrate at a higher level. Things like joy, gratitude, appreciation, acceptance, happiness, peace. And you have, as you go down the line, you have emotions that vibrate at a lower level. These are called depleting, meaning they're going to drain your battery. We call them heavy emotions, right?
Yeah, anger. You feel like that weight on you.
You feel that weight, especially as you get really, really, really low level. Things like shame, embarrassment, grief, right?
Yeah.
As you get a little bit higher up in the depleting realm, you've got like anger and frustration, anxiety, those kind of things. But those depleting emotions are always going to drain your battery. Renewing emotions give you energy over time. And what I loved about hearing it from their realm, and as they're given the information in a very scientific way, what they show is, or their belief is, there is no good or bad emotions. All emotions have utility. That's why they're there, to keep us as human beings alive, and they all have a purpose. So there's no good or bad emotions, but there are ones that give you energy and ones that drain your energy. And so grief, as an example, has utility, but it's when we hold on to it too long that a very adaptive emotion turns maladaptive.
Okay.
Or anger. Is anger necessary?
At times.
At times, yeah. I would say it gets somebody out of an abusive relationship. Our country was founded by a bunch of people. They got pissed off.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Like, thank God they were able to say no more.
Yeah.
Right. Anger has utility, but when we are in a perpetual state of anger, you have an adaptive emotion, something that's there to charge us for something in the moment that turns maladaptive.
Okay.
And that's when we start to see a residue, an emotional residue in the body, where those things stick around for long periods of time.
That's interesting.
We got to metabolize it. Just like when you eat a meal, you take this food into your body and you metabolize it, meaning your body's going to decide, this is the good stuff and I'm going to use it. I'm going to take these vitamins and put them into the body here. I'm going to take these amino acids and rebuild muscles here. I'm going to take this calcium and work the bones. And on this side, here's all the crap. I'm going to go poop it out or pee it out. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Emotions are supposed to work that same way, where we have an emotion. Maybe it's even frustration, but then we metabolize it out. We're not supposed to hold on to those things. But the more that we're engaged in a culture that says, don't feel that, we tend to bury it. Don't express it. We tend to bury it.
So then you're not metabolizing it.
You're not metabolizing it.
And not getting it out.
Yeah. A great example of this. Are you familiar with trauma release exercises, TRE?
I don't think so. Or is it like tapping and that kind of stuff? Or
No,
okay, no, then I do not.
Tapping is awesome too, by the way.
Okay.
Emotional freedom technique, highly recommend. It's a great way to put yourself into a calmer space. But trauma release exercises in the military and in policing, the one area where you see most of the pain felt is probably the low back. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the knees. The low back and the knees. Yeah.
And the low back. Well, TRE was developed in research with the military to say, why are all these soldiers having low back pain? And even what do we typically attribute that to. People always say,
road marching and rucking, carrying weight on your back, jumping out of airplanes, all that. Yeah.
Utility belt, all the things. And what they found is there's a couple responses to trauma that are just natural to us. A typical response to a traumatic event in front of you is based on your physiology is to coil, right? Mm-hmm. That's all animals, right?
Yep.
They coil down when something bad in front of them happens. But can a soldier do that? Can a police officer do that? Can a CO do that? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
They have
run
to
towards it.
Yeah, run towards it. Stand up. But it doesn't change the fact that your physiology is sending an immense amount of energy into your psoas muscles.
Okay.
So it's trying to get you to do the thing, but you move forward. And so what you have is your psoas muscles, your hip flexors end up getting over time very tight, and it pulls a lot of that energy forward in your low back. And the second response to trauma after the event is to shake. It's true in all animals outside of, zoo animals and domesticated animals. But in nature, after a traumatic event, you see in the wild, animals will go away and shake. They shake it out.
They're literally like depleted or like getting that energy out of them then.
Getting that energy out and disrupting all the chemical responses that were just in the body. We don't do that because what do we associate shaking with?
Yeah, you're fearful. Yeah.
I'm scared. I'm fearful. I'm going to look weak.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the upper hand because now I look like I'm so we don't shake. We never get this energy out of our bodies. So what trauma release exercises do is it's a set of exercises you do in a particular order that it gets your body to tremble.
Oh, wow.
And you get to a place where you're laying on the ground, but you're trembling for 30 to 45 minutes and it shakes all this stuff out.
Does that come with an emotional dump as well?
It can.
Okay.
I've done it only 2 times because I used to have a terrible lumbar issue where I couldn't sit in the car for an hour without being in excruciating pain. I used to think the same thing. Oh, it's the military. It's carrying all that gear and all this stuff. And I got turned on to TRA and I said, I'll try it. So I did 1 session off of a video I found on YouTube. And that 1 session eradicated, I would say 80% of my low back pain.
Wow.
1 session.
You're going to have to show me that video when we're done. Seriously, I would love to try that.
Oh, it was a game changer for me. So 1 session, no emotions around it for me. Nothing like, I wasn't, even in an emotional place. I was listening to music, I think, in the background.
So just addressing the physical then.
Just addressing the physical.
Okay.
And then I did it a second time, and I would say that eradicated the rest of my low back pain.
The same protocol, the same video?
Same exact video.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at things like that, it's almost undeniable. And again, I was still the skeptic. So when I got into the energy world where I started getting to work with people who have had serious traumatic events, especially in the responder community, where we started to unpack what they are holding on to and how it's affecting their physical machine. That's when I was usually, when people were having these big moments of healing, I was the most surprised one. I was still that skeptical.
As you're administering it and healing people, and it's still like blowing your mind. Huh?
Yeah.
That's rad.
Did that just happen? Are you serious?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Are you familiar with the Human Garage? It's a website or a page on Instagram where they talk about releasing trauma from the body through like certain, like, I don't know if it's Reiki work or deep tissue massage, but as they release it, the emotion comes out as well. Is that in the same wheelhouse that we're talking about as far as like releasing a trapped energy and then having an emotional response as it is let out, I guess you would say?
I've seen it both, and it's always dependent on the person.
Okay.
I've done energy work on folks where it was very intimate to them, and they become emotional. I've also had a lot of people come to me who have had serious traumatic events that they say, I can't even think about this event without crying. And in the session, a lot of times what we'll do is we reframe, not through words, but just through energy, their relationship with the experience.
Okay.
To where it no longer has that emotional connection, where they can actually recall the event, but it doesn't produce the same emotional response.
So you're almost taking like the power away from it?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Let me ask you this. Like, for the people that, you'll call them like energy vampires, right?
Yep.
Someone will come in the room, and I've had people that I consider friends that I like, but there's just something about when they step into the room that's like, you can feel it like sucking the energy. Is that because they've been in that depleted state for so long that it's almost like they're pulling from you, or what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would describe it exactly like that.
Okay. Because that's what it feels like, but I don't know what's really going on.
Yeah. And I think, to their credit, most of them don't know that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Imagine growing up in a household where maybe you have abusive parents.
Mm-hmm.
And as a young child, in order to survive the day energetically, consciously you're not aware of this, but subconsciously if I could just pull some of Dad's energy, if I could relieve some of this low vibrational and pull it in.
So people are taking it on.
Right. So at a very early age, and some of the most empathic people that you deal with that have that ability to pull in other people's energy, they have a lot of history that they learn from an early age how to do this very thing.
So if you're one of those people, what are the practices to either metabolize that or dissipate it?
Yeah. Well, one of the things, I will tell you right now, I am not an empath.
Uh-huh.
When I do energy work, I do not
take that on.
I don't take it on.
Okay.
In fact, if I did, I probably wouldn't be anywhere near energy work. Because people that do, I don't know how they keep going forward with that. But
do you feel like, maybe not take theirs on, but Charlie Goldsmith talks about it. He says, when I heal people, I put out so much of my energy that he can actually deplete his own system. And he's like, if I work on people too hard, my immune system takes a hit. I start to get sick because you're pushing out too much of your own energy.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've experienced or can feel?
No.
Okay.
It's really interesting. The only way I could describe it is when I start doing an energy work session with folks, my energy actually raises to a really high level, and I feel amazing after. I think that my subconscious knows you have to vibrate at a certain level in order to be able to work on somebody. And when I go into that place, so much so that oftentimes after the sessions, I don't remember a lot of it.
Oh, wow.
I've had people say, oh yeah, remember during the session when you said this, could you explain more? And I say, I don't even remember saying that. It's not like I go into a trance or anything, but I'll give you another example of how I think this shows up. We walk around typically throughout our day as we, go to the gym, do our tasks, go to the grocery store in a beta state in our brainwaves, where we walk around and then we maybe hit traffic and I'm in high beta. It's a high stress. And then we have our alpha is when we say, you know what, I'm going to go for a walk for a second, or I'm going to go meditate. And we shift, maybe even it's breath work.
Mm-hmm.
I shift from beta to alpha. That's a really good place to be. But as we come out of that, I just reset my system, and now I can move forward in a different place. Mindfulness does that. When you talk about being in the present moment, and then you shift out of alpha into theta. Your brain is in theta, and theta is where creativity is unlocked, and you have these brilliant insights, and you're vibrating at a different level. And
so you move from alpha. Coming out of alpha puts you into theta typically.
It
can
if you're using alpha as a reset.
Okay.
This is why before going into an energy session, I'm doing the thing. I'm putting my heart in a coherent state, meaning it is my beat to beat ratio is in a symmetrical place. I could draw it out for you later, but and it's connecting my heart and my brain together, so they're working in unison instead of opposite of one another, which is where when we're in beta, that's typically where our heart and brain are at odds.
Okay.
So then I shift into theta.
And can you feel this and know when you're going from one to the next?
Well, not typically, and I'll give you an example. When you showering is a way to shift your brain into theta.
Okay.
And the reason I bring this up is, have you ever been in the shower and you have like some brilliant insight?
Dude, it's so funny you say that. It's so funny you say that because I shower late because I run the gym at night, and I get home at 8:30 to 9, shower, cook a late dinner, and then sit in bed and talk with Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to God, like all of my aha moments are at my nightly shower.
Yep. It's your brain.
Wow.
Your brain is in theta. And have you ever experienced this where you have some creative insight and you're like, oh my gosh, I know what to do now.
Yes.
And then the second you get out of the shower,
it's gone.
It's gone. That's the only way I could describe when I do energy work. I am in theta. I'm in that place. And then if I'm not recording it or taking notes, it's going to be gone.
Do you know, is there any, I'm sure there is research on it. Does marijuana put your brain into theta?
I have no idea.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Do you partake at all?
I have.
Okay. Because I feel like when I use THC,
Mm-hmm.
like the creativity side of me comes alive.
Yeah.
And you can just sit in your own thoughts, and it's obviously it's your thoughts, but why after I use this plant am I so much more likely to like come up with all these new ideas?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I wonder, I'm going to look into that now, because you're right. When I get into a hot shower at the end of the day, my brain comes alive, starts thinking about this and that. And it's like, sometimes because how our bathroom and our bedroom set up, I'll yell out to Jenny. I'm like, hey, I want to remind me to tell you this, because you're right. As soon as you get out and you start showering off or drying off, it's kind of like those thoughts are kind of gone now.
Gone. Another thing.
And sometimes I feel like, dude, what is going on with me where I was just thinking about something and now I feel like I can't retrieve that thought.
Yep.
That's wow. Dude.
You're back into beta. Another place that oftentimes people can shift into theta is driving.
Okay.
Right? Have you ever had those insights in driving? And then you might even be, how did I get here?
100%. No, 100%. I've had that happen plenty of times when it's like, dude, I don't even remember the drive.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, when we talk about being in high stress situations, and to go full circle with this conversation as well, you talked about at the beginning, struggle being a catalyst for growth and for all the things that we've been talking about. Another program that I have been through several times is with the Flow Research Collective. So Stephen Kotler, if you're familiar with the name, I would say he's got the most information on how to hack flow.
Okay.
How to hack into optimal performance and take total control of your physical machine.
What's his name again?
Stephen Kotler.
Okay.
The Rise of Superman, Stealing Fire. He's got The Art of Impossible. He talks about how is it that human beings can keep leveling up. We see it. He's a researcher that went into, he studied sports, and, you know, he would dabble, and he said, man, I would get injured and come back. And now all these records have been set again. You know, how does this happen? How do human beings keep tapping into what we said 6 months ago was an impossibility? And he really outlines that what he calls the flow cycle, that you're in beta, you shift to alpha, you move to theta, and then we go into recovery, which is your delta waves.
While you sleep, right?
You sleep. It can also be when you're in your sauna.
Okay.
When you're meditating. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to recover. But that beta, if I'm in a regular, if I'm just going through my day, kind of mediocre, it's not very likely that I'm going to be able to get to theta because I don't hit enough struggle. It's in the struggle that we can actually shift into flow state.
Okay.
That's what gets us there. So when you say
struggle, to like any type of struggle, like the sauna, the cold plunge, a hard workout, or even like for me, you know what's really difficult for me to do is sit down and read a book that I'm not very interested in.
Right.
Like, would that be considered struggle?
It could.
Okay.
So what he says is you get to a point where maybe you sit down with the book, you're reading, and at first you're just kind of like, oh, this is interesting. And pretty soon you're like, this is boring.
Yes.
And you're pushing. Then you take the next, you get to a point where you're really getting frustrated. And then you do something like go for a walk or get up and, do a mindfulness practice.
Oh, I see.
Then you can shift yourself in alpha, and that facilitates you being able to move into theta.
Okay.
And this is where all new insights are going to come from. So if you're reading that book and you're like, this is like torture to me. You get up, go for a walk, and then you find yourself having these insights, and you may even be making new connections from what you just read. Your brain is starting to look at what you were just reading in a different way.
I see. So it's almost like the recovery from the struggle is where that stuff comes alive.
Yep. But being in flow, and Stephen Kotler's very clear about this, you can't stay there.
Okay.
It'll burn you out. You cannot stay in flow. So you have to have a recovery practice. You go into flow, you get your needs met, or do what you need to do, have some brilliant insights, come back and bang out a chapter in the book or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then you recover, you put it down. He mentions Hemingway. Hemingway used to, when he was in flow, stop early. He wouldn't finish writing a chapter.
Okay.
Sometimes he would even stop mid-sentence.
So he just knew that it was...
He wanted to end on a high. He didn't want to have the dump of okay, I have finished this task. I'm good now. He wanted to know that it was lingering there so that he could enter the next day right back into that sense of flow.
Wow. Dude, that is crazy, man. So then when you're entering these states and you're doing energy work, what does that look like? Like, do you have to physically be with the person?
No.
So you can do it over, do you do this stuff over Zoom?
Not Zoom, because, not that you can't do it over Zoom, but, you really don't have to see the person. I do it over the phone though.
Okay. Cause I mean, what's the term? Quantum entanglement?
Yep. Where
it doesn't matter if we're next to each other or we're 5,000 miles apart.
Yep.
Through quantum entanglement, it's still the same.
Yeah.
And I'm basically just regurgitating that. I couldn't really dissect it or explain it any deeper than that.
Yeah.
But I've heard other healers say that. It's like, no, you can be anywhere and we can heal each other still.
Yep.
Do you feel energy moving through you when you heal others?
Sometimes. So, and it's usually when I hit a block. So it's really weird to say. I've done work on people where I'm asking questions, and the way it works is I'm going to ask yes or no questions and then see, I do muscle testing. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but muscle testing is essentially you test strong. Your muscles stay strong when you're saying something that's true or congruent, and your muscles go weak when you're incongruent or lying. And so what I do,
Wow.
yeah. So what I'll do is I'll work on somebody, and I'll essentially ask yes or no questions to, is there an energy in the body right now that you're holding on to that is affecting your physical health, or whatever, any reason that somebody would come and work with me. So I get a yes or a no, and obviously, typically it's going to be yes, because everyone's holding on to something. And then we say, okay, so where is it? What is it? That kind of thing. And so I go through a list of questions that gets me to exactly where it is. And I've had things where I've had times where people are saying no, and I'm like, well, I'm getting a yes. Nope, that's nothing.
Oh, there's shame or something attached to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's when I start to feel in my body, well, I'm feeling something right here, or I'm feeling something right here. And that's usually when I take the veil away, that people open up. Okay, this is what I had going on. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to go to an energy healer, probably don't go with the mindset that you're going to try and lie to him. Right. Like that's the opposite of what we're trying to work through here.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, people on that show were doing that too. And you could see, he's like, what you're saying is not making sense.
Right.
That's fascinating though. You're saying, when people lie, their muscles get weak.
Yeah.
Like that's like a universal rule. Like we are not going to be performing optimally.
Yeah.
When we're lying or being deceitful or doing things that we know is wrong. All the way down to our own physiology changing.
Yeah. I mean, you could even just to test it for yourself, you can see. So, as you pinch your fingers together and you move them, kind of bang them together, tell yourself, say, my name is Greg.
My name is Greg.
And then say, my name is Ian.
My name is Ian.
So a lot of people right there are going to find when they're doing incongruent activities,
Slips a little bit.
Yeah. And so
I'm going to geek out on that tonight.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a lot of different ways to muscle test.
I'm going to find out tonight if I'm the reincarnation of William Wallace.
Freedom. So yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do this. And
let me ask you this, or no, go ahead. If I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Because I see the tattoo of the cross on your arms. Is it safe to assume that you believe in the Christian faith?
Yes.
Because a lot of people that I know that are Christians are averse to energy work because they think it's witchcraft or of an evil source or something.
Right.
So then what would you say to that? Because I know people that could probably use some of your powers, but they're naturally averse to it because of their Christian beliefs.
Right. I think what worries a lot of people is that you think that I'm doing something, right? That I am, this is an ego thing, and it's not. I don't believe that I have, I'm not some spiritual being. I'm just doing a couple techniques, but we all have access to.
Okay.
And
that's where I was going next. So
yes, I believe that everyone has access to it, but our belief systems like that, our very limited belief systems, get in the way of that.
Okay.
I would also say that, especially in the Christian faith, is that when Jesus came, he gave us that message that you have the ability. I mean, he told his disciples, you will do these miracles and more than what I do. And they did. I mean, you know, he left and there was all this performance of miracles. And then because we have lost, we are reliant on, I would say, just the faith that I'm trying to be careful about how I say this. A great example is, I was looking for my phone. Have you ever read the book Illusions?
I've not.
So I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but at the beginning he talks about there's these creatures at the bottom of a great crystal river, and the river, the beautiful crystal river sweeps over them in its current every single day. They can't see it, but they can feel it. And one of the creatures says, I'm going to let go. The rest of the creatures are clinging to the bottom of the river, and that's how they experience their existence regularly. That clinging is all they know. Mm-hmm. And one of them says, I'm going to let go of this and trust that the great crystal river knows where it's taking us. And they were like, you fool, if you let go, you're going to be beaten and battered and swept across the floor. And he says, yeah, but if I don't do this, then I'm surely going to die of boredom, right? And eventually he does. He lets go. And exactly that happens. He's hurt, he's beaten, he's battered across, being swept down the river. But eventually he takes flight, and the river's taking him downstream. And downstream, there's another group of these beings. And they're like, look, a creature like us, and yet he flies. And they call up to him, Savior, save me. And he says, creatures, I am no different than you. The river delights to lift us all. All you have to do is let go. And they were like, Savior, come save us. And when they looked back, he was gone. Mm-hmm. And they were left telling tales of a Savior. And I just love that illustration, because when you look back at what Jesus said, and he's very perfect, but he did tell us that we have these abilities if we would just have faith in our abilities. If we did the thing, that we could do it. But we don't.
Yeah.
We say, save me and heal me. And he told us all along, you have the ability
to do that.
You hold the power. You have the same access. Otherwise, why did he die and, leave us with the capacity to access the Holy Spirit? Mm-hmm. Right. So,
well, no. And I don't remember if I was having a conversation with someone or if this was on a podcast recording recently, but it's said in almost all religious texts, you can find somewhere that they all share the same thought that the kingdom of God is within you.
Yep.
So it's oh, well, what does that mean? Why would that be being shared in most religious contexts? Yeah. And that's exactly why, because each individual holds all of these powers to perform miracles too. Right. And I'm fully on board with this now. I believe that that's the reality of this experience on planet Earth. Right. And, there's a part of me that wonders, if human beings hold these inherent powers to be able to do what guys like you and what guys like Charlie Goldsmith are doing, why were those powers ever either lost or hidden? Or is it just that most people don't have the faith to lean in and learn and acquire them?
It's such a complex question, but I don't even think it takes faith, because as I told you, I'm
you were surprised.
I'm surprised. Like, are you serious? That worked?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, how did you, if you were surprised that it was working, what was the catalyst then for you to actually say, you know what, I'm going to start helping people.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to try and lean into this and start doing this.
Yeah. Because I was immersed in the responder community and surrounded by people who were suffering on a regular basis. And when I learned about these things, there's a lot of information out there and different techniques. And one of my first exposures was the emotion code, where there's a way to release emotions that are trapped in the body that are causing distress. And I did work on people who are having severe PTSD issues, repeated nightmares from traumatic events and stuff like that. And doing a quick 10-minute session would release those things, where people were coming back and saying, I'm fixed. Like, what did you do? Even people doing exactly what you said. Well, that's witchcraft. What did you do to me? You healed me, you know. And they took the leap of faith, and maybe that faith was on their end, but it wasn't on mine. I was like, really? That worked? That's so cool.
Yeah. Do you wonder, when I watch this kind of stuff, if the healer is really the person healing, or if the healer is helping them access the power to heal themselves?
Yeah.
Or maybe a combination of both?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. I love it when people give me that answer.
I have no idea.
Because when people say I have no idea, it tells me they're authentic. You know?
Yeah.
That's one of the rules of jiu-jitsu. It's like when someone asks you something that you don't know, you say, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that if I understood it, then it probably would be of, you know, it wouldn't exist in that higher realm.
Yeah.
Sure. Just like God. There's no way I can understand God. God isn't something that you and I can sit down and quantify.
Uh-huh.
Right. So, yeah.
Do you believe in astral projection?
Yeah.
So I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast, but I had an astral projection.
Nice.
Last weekend.
Really?
But it was also induced from eating some psilocybin mushrooms.
There you go.
And so when it was, and I'm actually going to have her, she's a friend of mine. I'm going to have her on the podcast because I want to talk about this. So I'm not going to give all the details, but I'll play you the message when we wrap this up. I felt like I went out of my body, and suddenly I was with her. And she's a friend of me and my wife's, and I felt like I was communicating with her, but not through words, just through energy. And again, like, how do you articulate that with English vocabulary? It's almost impossible. And then I felt like I got electrocuted back into my body. It was like zap, and I sat up. I was like, ooh, what just happened? And then I thought, you know what? That felt so real to me. I wonder if she remembers having any type of interaction with me. But I'm not going to say anything to her. I don't want to, if she interacted with me, she'd probably send me a text and be like, hey, well, what was all that about, right? So I sat on it for 3 days. And then I responded and said, hey, do you remember any type of communication on Saturday? Yeah. And she goes, oh my God. She goes, I keep a voice journal when really weird things happen to me. And I'm just going to send you Saturday's voice journal. Wow. And I'll play it to you. I'll play it for you when we're done.
Yeah.
But her experience mirrored mine identically.
Wow.
So there's something
with
going on.
The electrocution and everything?
With communicating via energy, not words, and having a conversation with someone. And like, she articulated the experience exactly how I felt it. Yeah. And she was in Southern California, and I was in my bed in Lake Stevens, Washington.
Yeah.
So what's going on there? I don't know, but it's real enough for me. I'm leaning into all this stuff.
Yeah.
I want to know more. And I just don't think that these things are up for debate anymore. We hold so many more powers than I think we really realize. And, you know, I have some other friends in the healing space that believe in like just lost ancient knowledge and ancient practices. And now people are starting to rediscover it again. And it's exciting.
So you're willing to let me do an energy session?
I would love for you to. Yeah, 100%. Like you say when. This stuff is I honestly like listening to you talk about these things and the books you're recommending and the specialists that you're bringing up. Like I fully intend on listening to this episode with a notepad, writing all that stuff down and geeking out on it because I can just feel that it's truth. I can just feel like sitting here with you. The things you're saying, you're not some weird, you're not some wacko. You're a guy that's figured out something that's beneficial to people. Yeah. And especially like Scott Wells. I've known Scott Wells for 20 years now. Yeah. He's one of the most solid human beings that I think I know. Mm. And when he told me this, and Scott's the one that got this bracelet from you and gifted it to me. Yeah. He's like, my friend Ian made this, and there's powers to this. He calibrates the beads, and it's like, and again, even back then, before I had any understanding of what that meant, if Scott Wells is giving me a gift and saying that it's important, yeah. I know that there's truth to that. And I've been wearing this bracelet ever since.
Yeah. It's so wild too. I mean, when you think about the world of vibration and things like that, beads, crystals, I wouldn't say I'm a hippie or anything like that, but I remember going to my chiropractor out here. I don't think he's out here anymore, but he was in Marysville. And I went to acupuncture.
Okay.
He was an acupuncturist, and he goes, "Do you do any work with crystals?" And I said, "No." Are you kidding me? I said, "They're just rocks, right?" And he goes, "Put out your hands." And I put out my hands. He put a crystal in one side, and he goes, "What do you feel?" I said, "I feel a rock." He goes, "Now put this one." And I could feel the other one. It was weird. It felt like it was buzzing. And I'm just holding this stone. And I said, "That is weird." He said, it's vibration. You know, and all things vibrate. It's just what is it vibrating at? You know, when you talk about this is what vibrating at 432 hertz.
Yep.
That can fill a space and affect the vibration in your body. Words, sound. I mean, words are nothing more than sound vibrations that travel through the air and go in. We attach meaning to it and all this, but yeah, it's so interesting. The world of vibration is so interesting.
I just bought the book. I forget the title of it, but it's the Japanese scientist that froze water.
Yes.
After putting different intentions into the water.
Yep.
And that goes back to what you just said. It's like the intentions of your words affect the physical environment.
Dr. Emoto.
Okay, that's right. Yeah.
Dr. Emoto. I mean, I suggest everyone look at that, especially because we're mostly water. Mm-hmm. Right. So think about not even the words that we say, but the words that we don't say that live up here. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what makes mantras so powerful.
Yeah.
To sit down and meditate and just patience, or love. Versus having the inner dialogue of, God, I'm so stupid.
Yeah.
Right. What kind of vibration does that create in us?
I actually have one of my students here. His name's Danny, and he's very he's dialed in on all the stuff that you're talking about. Not to your extent, but he's definitely a believer. And anytime someone says something that's like self-deprecating, even if it's in like a joking manner, he'll always call him on it and be like, "Don't say that about yourself." Because even saying it puts it out into the universe. You don't want that about yourself out into the universe.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think there's truth to that stuff.
Yeah.
Because some people always like make themselves the brunt of every joke.
Right.
And it's like, why are you doing that? What is the intention behind that?
Yep.
So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Man, there's another thing I wanted to ask you. As we were talking, I got all these ideas going through my heads and question. And it was when you're talking about the energy behind a specific action, right?
Mm-hmm.
How you're like, hey, sometimes anger serves you, right? Mm-hmm. And like, say someone cuts you off in traffic,
right,
and you're mad at them.
Yeah.
Well, anger's not going to serve you there, right? And I talk about this on the podcast all the time because road rage was a big problem for me.
Right.
And I don't know if that's just me as a person or if you can tie it back to the war or whatever, but I used to get very, very angry at people on the road. And I've been intentional about trying to be like, oh, well, that maybe they cut me off because their kid's in the back of the car and they're trying to get to the ER.
Yeah.
And I tell myself a story that's like, hey, I'm not the victim here. They're the ones that's going through hardship.
Right.
And maybe I should just appreciate that and let them give space for them.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, the same exact thing is happening, but the way in which I perceive it in my head changes how I feel about it. And I've kind of been doing that with all the crazy stuff that's been going on with our government lately. Mm-hmm. I mean, 2 years ago, I literally wanted to pick up my battle axe and be William Wallace because I'm like, dude, these people, right? Yep. And I still feel that way, but I honestly feel like I've changed my perspective. That's like, hey, if we ever have to push back against these people, I'm not doing it because I hate them. I'm doing it because I love my children. Right. And I want to make sure that my children have a good, powerful future. Yeah. So if I were to ever find myself in any type of conflict, it's actually from a place of love. Yeah. It's not from a place of hate. And I think that that has the potential to make you probably the best warrior you could be.
For sure. Every emotion that you feel is preceded by an appraisal.
What do you mean by that?
The reason you even feel emotion is because you have attached a value to whatever stimulus is in front of you. So you have a stimulus, then you attach a negative, positive, neutral, and based on that appraisal, your body dumps a chemical cocktail, right? Which we then label as an emotion. Once we do that, then we create a story about what my physical experience is. It creates a vacuum in our mind, and we immediately create a story, which then produces a behavior, right? And we do this every second of our day. So in your example, I'm driving down the road, somebody cuts me off. That's nothing more than a stimulus. It has no value. But then you attach a label to it. Most likely for a lot of people, it's going to be a negative.
Yeah.
I attach a big negative sign, and then I produce a correlating emotion. If it's a negative label, I'm going to dump a depleting emotion into my system. If it's a positive label, I'm going to dump a renewing emotion into my system. And so let's just follow that logic. I get cut off, attach a negative, produce anger, then I create a story. They're an idiot. They're stupid. They're a bad driver. They're an asshole, whatever. And then I produce, based on the story that I just created, I produce my behavior, my response, honk the horn, flip them off, go around them and cut them off, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or it's what it sounds like you're doing is the healthiest way of doing this, which is you're not changing the emotion, you're changing the actual appraisal. So that when you're cut off, you don't attach a negative to it, you attach a positive to it, which allows you to dump a calmer physical, emotional response into your body. And then you tell yourself the more positive story, which is they might have something going on.
Yeah.
They're not a bad person. Maybe they didn't see me. It's what we call giving people the benefit of the doubt. And then because of that, your behavior then changes. But it all starts with that second step, which is the appraisal process. That's the game right there, because if we wait until the emotion gets dumped into our body,
now it's too late.
It's too late, or it's incredibly difficult to combat.
Yeah.
But the appraisal process determines what emotions we are dumping into our body. And what I love about this, do you remember the movie? You probably saw this, Super Size Me.
Yes. That guy just died not too long ago.
He did. Yeah. Not from McDonald's.
Okay. Yeah.
He didn't go on it. I don't think so anyway, but the whole premise was, I'm going to binge on McDonald's, this incredibly unhealthy food, for 30 days. 2 weeks into it, if you remember, his doctor's like, you got to stop. You're killing yourself. Yep. Your organs are shutting down. And he's like, no, I'm going to ride this thing out and see what happens. Howard Martin, who he was one of the founders of the Heart Math Institute, asked this question on a documentary. I think it was Heal.
Okay.
He asked this question, and it so profoundly hit me. He said, what is your emotional diet? What emotions are you binging on a regular basis? Healthy ones or unhealthy ones?
Yeah.
Are you binging regularly on resentment, frustration, anger, hate, skepticism? Or are you binging on, are you just having a gratitude practice?
Is there something that's inherent inside of us that gets addicted to the negative vibrations?
God, that is a good question.
Yeah, because like, and I always say I'm as guilty of as anyone. Like right today, I was watching, there's a bunch of stuff coming across my Instagram screen, and it's like, oh, Kamala Harris this, and like, why do I give that a seat at my table?
Yeah.
And I've definitely become a lot more aware of it lately, and I try and mitigate that stuff. But at the same time, I think I'm as guilty as anyone of being drawn into the negative.
Yep.
And a lot of people, and that's someone that's conscious of it.
Right.
There's probably a lot of people that just turn on the news at night and they're pissed off for the next 2 hours, and they don't even know they're doing it to themselves. And I wonder what is inherent inside of us, because you would think we'd be drawn like, hey, I'm going to put something on that I feel love and happiness from for the next 2 hours. You think that's what we'd be drawn to. But for whatever reason, we're not.
Yeah.
You know what? It might be, just sitting here thinking about what you said about how getting into theta, you have to go through a little struggle first. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if like we as human beings are inherently drawn to a conflict because we know the other side of that conflict is where we actually get to shine. But in today's society, instead of conflict, then resolution, and then creativity, it's like we're trapped in the perpetual conflict phase.
Maybe. Or we don't make that transition.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're saying. We stay stuck in that high beta.
Man, it's sad.
Yeah. Or it's just, like you said, it's so familiar.
Yeah.
Just like if I eat nothing but junk food and someone offers me a salad.
Uh-huh.
No, I don't want that. That sounds disgusting. Right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that's healthy. That's exactly what your body is craving.
Uh-huh.
You're like, no, I'll eat Doritos. This is where I want to be.
Yeah, and it's weird. We are, creatures of habit.
Yeah.
And we also like, they say like, not only humans, but even dogs will seek negative energy over indifference. No energy at all. Yeah. Because that's like the worst spot to be in, right? Yeah. At least you hear that. Like, same thing with, was it Dr. Emoto that did the rice studies too?
I think it was an offshoot of that, but that is a
like indifference is one of the most destructive emotions to feel. Like kids would rather get yelled at than be ignored, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is, God, it's crazy.
And they act out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Give me an emotion. Yep. Even if it's a bad emotion, give me one.
Yeah.
Well, dude, we're at 2:05 already.
Oh man.
I'll tell you what, I wish we would have opened up with energy.
I feel like we're just warming up.
I know, right? As opposed, here's the thing, like we lived our lives. We were first responders. You did what you did. I did what I did. So, I mean, talking about that stuff is good, but this stuff lights me on fire, man.
Yeah, I can tell that you are excited about it.
Yeah. Cause I feel, it's just like, and I don't know if you're a jiu-jitsu guy at all. Are you? Did you train jiu-jitsu at all?
I did, but not these days.
So when you first start training jiu-jitsu, nothing makes sense. Right. It feels awkward. It feels weird. It can feel frustrating. And then when it starts to click, it's like, oh, this is what it is. Yep. I feel like I'm on a new journey and things haven't clicked yet, but they're starting to. Yeah. And when you start to feel that momentum and you start to feel things shifting, it's like, it's exciting.
It's a paradigm shift.
And yeah. And this is definitely going to be a new phase of my life leading into this stuff and learning about it. And it's, you feel it. It's an exciting journey.
Good for you, man.
When you're like, well, would you let me work on you? I was like, dude, I'm so happy he said that because sooner or later, like that's going to happen. I want that to happen.
Yeah.
Well, to wrap this up, I guess I'll give you the final words. And are you interested in putting your information out there for people? Are you on social media or anything like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you cool with me adding you in the show notes so people could contact you if they were interested in? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll give you my information. People can email me. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have I don't have business social media like Instagram or Facebook, only my personal stuff. But
okay.
You could definitely reach out to my business email or find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with, text me it. I'll put it in the show notes below. But I have no doubt that there are going to be people that hear this. And again, this show gets consumed by a lot of soldiers and first responders. And maybe at the lunchroom, they're not comfortable talking about this, but they're driving in their car. They're hearing this conversation. They're knowing the words you're saying are true. Right. And it's going to resonate with people.
Yeah. We don't have to stay stuck in heavy.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Dude, I love that, man. Well, any final words or final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for what you do. I mean, you are a voice that wouldn't have been heard if you didn't follow your values. I mean, that should be the message that everyone gets. Imagine a world where people didn't follow what they knew to be true and right. We would never level up as a society. So thank you for inspiring me. And
I appreciate hearing that, man.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, man. And I'll tell you what, anytime you're up here, if you want to do another round of this, I'd love to have you back, bro.
Let's go.
All right.